You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/missionlog. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/missionlog to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 523, Demon.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we explore strange new places, get to know the locals, and see if there is something to be learned along the way. We'll share any morals, meanings, or messages, or cloning techniques with you, and we'll ask ourselves if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Demon. The one where the demon isn't a who, but a where. And Harry and Tom aren't themselves after taking a bath in a mercury hot tub. I'll be right back with trivia, but first Norman will tell all of you how to reach us.
Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember your comments can be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now, here's John Champion with this week's exorcism. This week's trivia.
All right, trivia for Demon. We have a story originally by Andre Bormanis, and we all know by now that Andre was the science consultant on Star Trek during this period, and we've seen two of his creative works so far on Voyager. He got the teleplay credit for Fair Trade, and then the full credit for Waking Moments. This story was his pitch, but the teleplay duty went to writer-producer Ken Biller. And it was Ken who focused on a couple of themes for this story, the kind of environmental parable, as well as the growing and evolving buddy relationship between Tom and Harry. It was directed by Anson Williams, and remember, this former Happy Days actor turned prolific director did a total of 6 episodes for the Star Trek franchise, 2 on DS9 and 4 here on Voyager. We're coming up on the end of his run, though. Anson has just 1 more to go in his Star Trek directing career. And we won't get too heavily into the effects during trivia this week, but it is worth noting that even though we've seen Voyager land twice before, these are brand new effects as the CG components kept getting better and more detailed. And the visuals team wanted to see new angles, and, well, they got them here. On top of that, we've got a fair number of planet landscapes, some created by using actual photos that Dan Curry took and modifying them, and then using a blend of matte work and CG to enhance those scenes. And by the way, all that silver metallic liquid, well, some of that is CG, some of that is very much an analog effect. Yeah, it was just a bunch of silver model paint that they poured out to get that effect. Let's meet our guest stars. Well, nope. Sorry, talk about saving money on guest stars, which is fair since we had a good number of them last week. But we do have the return of a recurring character who we haven't seen in a while. He's Voyager's other resident Vulcan, Vorik, played, of course, by Aaron Enberg.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. If your face and your eyes melt into silver pies, that's a worry.
Prologue. Time to cut most of the power on Voyager. Deuterium levels are low, which means the crew has to conserve every last bit they can. They'll operate in gray mode by cutting unnecessary energy expenditures. It also means that Tom can joke about Harry powering the mess hall on a bike, and some crew members will be relocated, and Neelix decides to try his luck in sickbay. 7 of 9 is still hard at work, against orders, but she happens to find a source of deuterium. It just happens to be on a Class Y or Demon-class planet, extremely inhospitable to life as we know it. Act 1. So it's off to Demon Planet we go, taking very specific precautions to Voyager's shields. And the first attempt Seven makes to beam up some deuterium, well, it does not go well. She and a transporter tech very narrowly escape certain death when the sample explodes on the transporter pad. At a staff meeting, Harry Kim recommends a bold strategy. Let him go to the planet in a shuttle and an EV suit and bring back some deuterium. He even volunteers his buddy Tom Paris to go with him. With very few options remaining, Janeway approves, and Tom is impressed with Harry's determination. Perhaps he's showing a bit of initiative to adjust the perception that he's still the kid who he was 4 years ago. These two start their mission, a bumpy ride to the surface, to say the least. When they touch down, they waste no time exploring the surface from the safety of the EV suits and find pools of strange silver metallic liquid at a far lower temperature than the roughly 500 degree Kelvin of the atmosphere. The liquid is saturated with deuterium, and Harry goes in closer to get a sample while Tom starts off for another pool of the stuff. When he turns away, though, Harry goes radio silent and disappears, having fallen into the pool. Tom fishes him out, and Harry says it was the strangest thing, the feeling that he was almost pulled in. They don't have time to figure it out, though, since Harry's EV suit has been compromised, and he's got an air leak. He'll run out in 30 seconds if Tom doesn't get him back to the shuttle. On the way, though, Tom's suit is compromised too, and a little bit of that silver metallic liquid creeps inside the breach. The same countdown begins for Tom too, and soon both find themselves prone on the ground with their onboard computers warning that oxygen depletion is imminent. Act 2. The Doctor is beset with uninvited guests as Neelix and others propose making his workplace their temporary residence while Voyager conserves power. Naturally, he is resistant until Chakotay reminds him that they could just deactivate him until the crisis passes. Since Tom and Harry missed their check-in with Voyager, Janeway has a big decision to make. She's unwilling to risk another shuttle, and every minute Voyager loses power. In that case, they'll land Voyager. If they find deuterium, they'll be able to restore power and fly again. It's another rocky touchdown, and now it's on Chakotay to assemble the team to go find Tom and Harry. In a corridor, B'Elanna catches up to him, but she's perhaps too concerned about Tom's disappearance to be a good fit for the job. She suggests he takes 7 of 9, since if anyone can keep a cool head under extreme circumstances, it is her. Meanwhile, in sickbay, there's a battle of wills brewing as the Doctor feels his territory is compromised. He's loudly singing and organizing equipment while Neelix and other crew members try to sleep. They compromise only when Neelix threatens to teach the others how to sing Klingon opera. Out on the planet's surface, Chakotay and Seven find the shuttle, and it's not long after that they find footprints belonging to Tom and Harry. As they follow the path, they pass more of the silver metallic liquid, and Seven stops short of collecting a sample. Moments later, Chakotay loses his footing over a chasm and would have plunged to his death if not for Tom Paris, who happens to be in the right spot and happens to look healthy as ever, no EV suit to be found, and welcoming his fellow crew to the Demon Planet. Act 3. Yeah, that's weird. Tom says that he and Harry were on the verge of death, and then something happened. They could breathe the air, and they were fine. What's more, he's pretty exuberant about whatever has taken place, and he wants Chakotay and Seven to take off their helmets. They decline, but they'll pick up some of that sweet, sweet deuterium and take it back to the ship. Deeper in the cave is Harry, who has undergone the same kind of transformation as Tom. He seems happy to be there, but also happy that his crewmates have arrived. They'll take some deuterium back to the ship, and with a little resistance, Tom and Harry agree to beam back aboard and be checked out by the Doctor. As soon as they arrive, though, the two start choking and gasping for air. A force field is erected in sickbay with atmospheric gases pumped in. The Doctor quickly finds that the silver liquid is present in their bloodstream and has bioformed them to adapt to the planet's unique environment. With no way to permanently replicate the alien atmosphere, either he finds a way to bioform them back to the way they were, or they'll have to be left behind. Act 4. Harry returns to the surface with Chakotay and Seven, and his perception of the place is very different from theirs. While they see a punishing, desolate wasteland, he sees beauty and expresses a deep connection to this new world. As they overlook a vista, Seven's tricorder picks up signs of humanoid life, and the trio move onward. Meanwhile, both the Doctor and Janeway will run some scientific tests on the silver liquid. It is full of mystery, not to mention deuterium, hydrogen sulfates, and, proteins. It's got organic properties. Ew, and B'Elanna just got some on her thumb, which then very strangely shapes itself into a clone of that very thumb. If that wasn't strange enough, well, on the surface, that tricorder signal leads the away team to find the bodies of Harry and Tom, still alive, but just barely. Chakotay gets a call from Tuvok that they've got to get a move on. That silver organic goo is now creeping up to Voyager and causing the ship to sink. But Chakotay has some news for Tuvok. There are 5 to beam up, including the real Tom and Harry and the Harry clone, who has now expressed his desire to stay right where he is. He runs off just as a transporter beam activates, and there's no time to go back for him. Voyager has to lift off now. It's a short trip, though. The harder Voyager tries to pull free, the metallic liquid on the surface pulls back harder. Act 5. While the crew work on a solution to get unstuck, Tom and Harry are attended to by the Doctor. They'll be okay in time, but that leaves the clone Tom to contemplate his very existence. The silver metallic liquid apparently cloned everything about Tom and Harry down to their memories, and he's confused. He's different only in his desire to get back to the planet. As far as he's concerned, he is the same guy, but he wants to go back to the surface. When Voyager attempts to break free again, this time with a nadion burst from the phasers, the planet fights back, rocking the ship violently. Tom feels the burst, and the other Harry Chem calls in from the planet. Janeway will do her best to talk this out, and she has the other Harry beamed aboard, in a force field, of course, with planetary atmosphere. The Harry clone tries to express what's going on. He doesn't fully understand it, but he and the planet are connected somehow. He refers to himself and the planet as we, and they need Janeway to cease fire. As best they can surmise, the silver blood, as he calls it, was never sentient before, but now it is, having cloned Tom and Harry and taken on consciousness in the process. But now we're at an impasse. The silver blood has awareness because of Voyager's visit. Harry and Tom gave it thought and awareness. Now it just wants more. Janeway and crew can't stay, the place is too hostile, but she can make a compromise if the crew donate enough DNA. Then the silver blood can replicate enough people to not be alone. Janeway assembles the crew on a volunteer basis, presumably, in a cargo bay, and the next thing you know, Voyager lifts off, leaving a duplicate crew on the planet's surface, watching their DNA donors fly away. The end.
Wonderful job with the recap, John. I was wondering if you were able to exercise all of your demons, from your recap, or are we just starting the exorcism because, the power of the pod wraiths compels you?
Wow, good.
Thank you.
Nice callback there. Definitely have not exercised all the demons of the script. And many of you who watch along with the podcast, watch the show, you'll recognize that, it definitely leave out some stuff and condense some things because I think those are better served in our observations than just taking a detour. But there are other good moments in this script for sure that we will point out. Yeah. First and foremost, though, the very idea of fuel on a starship always confuses me because I always just thought it was the lithium regulating the matter-antimatter reaction, and that's it. And I mean, even modern nuclear ships can run for decades without refueling. So maybe Sam or one of the other scientists in our audience, or Paul. We have scientist Paul, chemist Paul. We also have Paul, who served on a nuclear vessel, I believe.
Yeah, right.
Maybe they can explain it to me sometime in an episode of After Dark.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, regarding the whole conserving power, I'm no scientist.
Yeah.
But I do know, like, basic, like, science and physics. So if they cut engines at a certain speed, wouldn't inertia keep them at that same speed unless acted upon by an external force? Isn't that something I learned in science? Can't they just, like, space glide?
I think so. And they could just hit thrusters every now and then, just like a little RCS to change their course a little bit. That would be okay. Now, with warp, the rules may be totally different.
Sure.
But, that is another possibility there. Mm-hmm. Okay, Tuvok. Settle down, Tuvok. Because the whole interaction with Neelix about the blanket and the book, like, look, people can have their creature comforts like a blanket that's not doing anything to you other than just leaving one more Starfleet issue blanket on the shelf. Why would that be a thing to take away?
It's a strange scene, like
it really is.
We've lauded our praises on Inspector Tuvok, Security Guard Tuvok, Machine Gun Tuvok, but Wet Blanket Tuvok, literally, not our favorite at all.
No.
I really dig Neelix's book prop, though. Like, I love, and I think that like, listeners have known kind of like or understood our aesthetic of seeing something kind of antiquated or an antique, married with kind of like the aesthetic of this 24th century technology. I think it's so cool seeing an actual real, and I know this is a Talaxian book, but still, I love the prop. I think the prop is very cool. Yeah,
I do too. Yeah, props to that prop.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do have 0.47 terahertz.
Yeah, we do.
Getting a shout out early on, so that was good to see. And by the way, this whole story here, this is just a lesson in why Starfleet needs robots, of all things. And it was a weird bit of dialogue about why they couldn't send a probe down there, because, the probe would incinerate in the atmosphere. So if a probe would incinerate, why doesn't a shuttle incinerate? And could you just put the same shielding around the probe that you already have on a shuttle?
Yeah.
Like, these should not be difficult things to do. Also, here's one of my plans. Just send a transporter pattern buffer down first, or the pattern enhancer, rather.
Yeah.
Just send those down first before you do anything. Here's my plan, okay? You ready? Take that probe, right? And in the probe, you have a little payload, and you put a bunch of transporter pattern enhancers in it. Shoot the thing down at the surface. So if the probe survives, great. Grab some deuterium, come back up. If it doesn't, boom, you got a pattern enhancer ready to go.
That's amazing. I hope that writer's hat is fitting you well right now.
It feels really comfortable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, yeah.
There's a great bit of dialogue that's going on in this scene. And then, Harry steps up, kind of steps to Tuvok, which is really good. But then Harry says, what's the alternative, right? How about the holographic doctor? Because we did see, and you made a point of this in Living Witness, that the doctor has a backup module.
Yes, he's got a backup.
So much to your idea of, like, being able to put something on the surface to go site-to-site transport, to anchor that technology there.
Yeah.
Send the backup module down, or a backup module down.
Yes.
Activate the doctor, and you don't have to worry about any type of atmosphere toxicity or damage or death or risk.
Yeah.
To him.
I love. See, so smart.
But then Picard would be like, I got another episode under my belt. How about you?
Yeah.
Right? So,
exactly. Yeah. We have a whole exchange about Harry getting a little backbone and talking some smack about Tuvok. I do like that he and Tom share this moment, like, oh yeah, I like to take that guy down a peg.
Yeah, that is what we affectionately call. I'm not sure if I can say this on the podcast.
The Harry, maybe not.
The Harry finger.
Yeah. There we go.
That's the Harry finger. Much like the Tuvok finger, Harry shot that finger.
He did.
Right back at him. I do love the lighting effects on the environmental suits in the planet. I think that
they
when
look great. Yeah.
you have gaseous effects and you have things that diffused light, it makes for really good that creepy kind of atmosphere where everything is just all the lights are blooming and haloed, and a little on that very filtered side, so it adds a lot of tension, I think, to the scene.
So good. Yeah.
So Harry has 30 seconds of oxygen left when his suit breaches.
Mm-hmm.
Can't Tom share his oxygen via oxygen tube like he did with B'Elanna when their suits were ruptured?
Nope.
I guess not. I guess not. Yeah. Sorry, you're not B'Elanna, Harry.
Right. Yeah. When we saw that pool of goo, I just kind of thought, ooh, shades of Armus.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when I watched it the first time, ooh, is this going to be a thing that comes to life? And well, just stay tuned, Funny scene at the beginning of Act 2, the Doctor referring to his residence, which I wondered, well, he could just go to the holodeck. Oh, well, I guess they turned that off. And then I do love Chakotay just stepping in yeah, we could deactivate you. That would save power. I mean, why not? Actually, it's a pretty good point he makes.
Yeah, I mean, I like Chakotay in these scenes, because he's kind of joking, but he kind of does have a point. But more importantly, who are the randos behind Neelix, right?
I know.
I mean, I know that Neelix is trying to make a point, and you have 4 or 5 rando officers behind him. He's like, yeah, come on, gang, we're going to take over the medbay, right? But why not bring back Vorik or Baxter or Ayala or maybe the Wildmans? Because you have a stable, right? You have a stable of B characters that you could have.
Yes.
And you know what? The Doctor and we, the audience, know these characters, so we'd be like, yeah, let them in. As opposed to the flotsam and jetsam that he just pulled from the mess hall. It's like, come on, gang.
The hoi polloi.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah. That's exactly what we should see. We should see faces that we recognize.
Hoi polloi, plus one for that, yeah.
Thank you. I mentioned it offline before we recorded. I'm not a fan of Voyager landing, just in general. I don't love the idea mostly of starships landing, but I do have to say this is a better landing sequence. This is better than the previous ones that we've seen. I just think you get a bit more detail on the model, and it's fine. The effects should be getting better from season to season, as they do. Strange dialogue exchange between B'Elanna and Chakotay.
Yeah,
right? Okay, It's not just me, because she just seemed a bit too earnest, and I really felt that the way those words were written, they felt really dated. Mm-hmm. I do like that we get a comment about 7 of 9 and her ability to be a good member of the away team. That felt earned. But, man, that was just an odd scene. Welcome back, Roxanne.
Yeah. It's a strange bookend scene to, when Chakotay was telling B'Elanna, to do your job. And, to deal with 7 of 9, and because it seemed appropriate. And he was basically saying, B'Elanna, I understand that you're upset. We're Starfleet officers, kind of grow up. But this was really weird.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it was a strange moment.
Yeah.
When we go back to sickbay and the Doctor and Neelix are having their little exchange there, their confrontation, mild confrontation. Does the Doctor actually need light to see? I don't think he does.
No,
I don't think so. Back on the planet, Chakotay really waits until the last dramatic second to stop 7 of 9 from collecting a sample of the silver liquid. I love that. She's she's got the cap open. By the way, I could not figure out any pattern to the numbers of those sample tubes that she's got. It's just random numbering on there. But it's like taking off the cap from, back when you bought your film in the old days and those plastic canisters, right?
Yeah.
And she's going in for it. She's got the lid off. She's ready to go. And Chakotay's like, let's move on. Let's do that later. Very dramatic.
It's so weird that you brought those last 2 points up because I had the exact same 2 points about the Doctor, but especially this one because she is literally in the act of scooping.
Yes.
And Chakotay's like, we don't have time for this. I'm like, it's going to take her more time to put the stuff away.
Exactly. And by the way, this is the same person who just defied orders at the beginning of the episode of shutting down astrometrics.
Yeah.
So you think she's going to obey your orders now?
Strange. I know that a lot of people here are fans of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and it's one of the things that I love bringing up when Scotty says to Kirk after they're attacked by the Reliant, Khan and the Reliant, and he goes, "Main energizers out." And then Kirk says, "Try auxiliary power," and Scotty kind of like exhales and goes, "Aye, aye, sir." The scene here where Tuvok says there's no more available power, why doesn't Janeway say, "Try auxiliary power"?
Auxiliary. Yes.
This is the perfect time to kick in auxiliary power.
Yes. Right? Oh, man. What a moment that would have been. Speaking of Tuvok, though, glad to see our other resident Vulcan back and actually has some lines here, have a little interaction. Nice to see Vorik.
I do dig Vorik, yeah.
Yeah,
Vorik is good. I dig Vorik as a character, but unfortunately, Vorik's episodes have been saddled with the whole kind of toxic masculinity in a way, right? Because on one hand, let's see how many male characters in this episode are going to remind B'Elanna to not lose her cool or let cooler heads prevail. Yeah. That's a little strange, don't you think?
It was a bit condescending, you know. But that whole exchange with Chakotay we already said was weird.
Yeah.
This exchange is... reinforces that weirdness.
It's like the whole thing with Akam and B'Elanna in the dinner scene, in a couple episodes ago. I think it was in Vis-a-Vis. It's like, I'm not overreacting. You're overreacting.
Yeah.
Right?
Cringe. Now, I left it out of the recap because it is too much of an aside, I thought, but I do like the moment of Neelix leaving sickbay, but being genuinely supportive of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Like, at that moment, just saying, if you ever need a place to stay, you come see me. It was a really nice moment, and I like the moment of recognition on the Doctor's face. That was cool. And then the Doctor, oh my God, saying to cloned Tom and Harry in their predicament of having been bioformed, well, I guess we'll just have to leave you behind. They can't. There's no other option we're discussing here, and we've got a cargo bay given over to Borg technology. You couldn't seal off another part of the cargo bay and beam up some more atmosphere. And by the way, the Doctor just kind of makes that call with Janeway right there in the room, just watching them. He's like, we just have to leave you behind. And Janeway just said, hang on, you don't get to make the call about who we leave behind.
Yeah, it was very strange cadence, in that scene, and we didn't even really understand what was happening. So it kind of brings me up to my next point. So when they're beamed up, when Tom and Harry are beamed up and they start immediately suffocating, so there's no immediate biocontainment from the transporter after they're, after Seven and Chakotay saw that they ditched their encounter suits earlier.
Yeah.
And then they're breathing toxic fumes and then they're suffocating and then they collapse. And it seems a little everything seems to they throw all the rule books out of protocol, right?
Yeah. Well, and it is a little weird earlier that Seven even does the tricorder scan on Tom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, he's fine," but he's filled with silver blood. I mean, the Doctor extracted it right out of his bloodstream.
That is absolutely the funniest thing you're going to hear on any mission. He's filled with silver blood.
That'll be my cosplay. I'll show up looking exactly like me. I'll just leak some silver blood everywhere I go.
Star Trek Las Vegas, man. Level up.
Yep, there we go. I do love how you just have a sample of that stuff in the lab, totally exposed. You can stick your thumb in it. You can do whatever with that. That's fine.
Or make multiple thumbs out of it.
Sure.
Right?
Multiple. Yeah.
So because leaving a foreign liquid substance outside a containment field of any kind is the safest way to study it. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
That being said, though, John, that's a lovely shade of silver polish on B'Elanna thumbs.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. And I do believe that if you used the Games Workshop color guide, that would have been mithril silver. That's for all you gamers out there.
Nice.
Mithril silver, yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, we've seen Janeway in the past be a little reckless, threatening to blow up the ship and do things like that. I'm good with this level of Janeway recklessness. I actually like her confrontation with clone Harry, and it's happening on top of the drama of, we're going to shoot the planet. Oh, you don't like that? Okay, now we're going to talk.
Right.
And by the way, that I will do everything I can to leave, and I will leave you here. I thought all of that, of all of the commentary that we've had about Janeway, I thought that was kind of peak Janeway.
But the thing is that knowing that Harry was Harry, and Harry, with the clone Harry, knew Harry's thoughts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Janeway was like playing against that. He understood that Janeway is good as a word.
Yeah.
Right. So that obviously that played into the scene. It was a great scene. And speaking of that, Garrett is a great actor when given actual well-written scenes to act.
Yes.
But then again, his best scene in this episode, which we're just talking about, is because he's not Harry Kim at this moment. So what does that say, John?
Well, I think we'll get into it. I think we will definitely come back to that. But it is interesting. You mentioned that Janeway knows kind of how Harry perceives her.
Yes.
And that Harry knows that Janeway is as good as her word. Janeway knows that Harry knows that. Mm-hmm. I do think she makes a pretty big leap, though, because as they're figuring out together, I like this exchange because they're both figuring out the mystery together. And then she just says, like, you want to populate the planet. And I thought, like, really? Did he say that? Because he did not say that. She's like, you want to populate the planet. All right. And before he can say anything, like, get everybody together. Let's get some DNA going. I want to see the full crew replicate on this planet before we leave. End of scene.
Intelligence is knowing that landing your ship on Mercury and landing your ship in Mercury are two very different things. Wisdom is knowing that neither one is a good idea.
We'll get right back to Demon after a word from this week's sponsor, ExpressVPN.
Watching Netflix without using ExpressVPN is like buying tickets to if you can get tickets to a Taylor Swift or name your favorite concert performer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mine's Taylor Swift. I can't get tickets to that. But
no, who can? Who can afford it? Yeah.
Right? Uh-huh. But only being allowed to watch the opening act. Some Swifties have done that, and some Swifties actually hang out in the parking lot. But it's not the same thing as watching Taylor Swift there.
I think of the number of bands that I've seen where the opening act was absolutely horrible, and I think buying a ticket and only seeing the opening act, that would put me off concerts forever and ever.
Exactly. You don't want that. You want to be put off from concerts forever and ever. So this is why you need ExpressVPN, because this allows you that direct access, to that celebrity, to that person in that concert, to that Taylor Swift, and not just any Swiftie experience, the Swiftie experience of all time, right? And you can do that in any country where Taylor Swift goes to, right? Because Netflix, like Taylor Swift's concerts, have thousands of shows, but without a VPN, you only get a fraction of that all-access content based on your location. You don't want that.
No, you want the real deal. You want the whole enchilada. You want the all of the show, not just a little piece of it. And let me explain to you what ExpressVPN does. I think all of you probably know by now, but it lets you change your online location. When you fire up ExpressVPN and you turn it on, there's a little toggle where you can change a location that it appears that you are coming from. So whatever website you're going to, Netflix, some other streaming website, well, they think you're coming from a different location. Now, I love to use this. Of course, I use my normal accounts here in the U.S. where they are already registered. But if it looks like I'm coming from a different location, well, suddenly I unlock all this other content. Like on Netflix, well, you can get a whole lot of a little show called Star Trek. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's been around for more than 50. Yeah, been around for more than 50 years. You can get all of it through other streaming services like Netflix. And I happen to love signing into the BBC iPlayer. It's really, really easy. I have my account, have my watch list there. Been watching a few things recently. I kind of, Norman, you and I have talked about this. We get the organization and the decluttering bug. So I was watching a show there, definitely inspired me to do more, called Sort Your Life Out. And I thought, you know what? That show is speaking directly to me, saying, John, sort your life out. So that's what I did. And I could only watch that by logging into BBC iPlayer and making it look like I was logging in from the UK. So that easy. Open up the app. I select the country where I want to come from. And then when I refresh whatever streaming platform I'm on, all of that content becomes available to me.
Here's why ExpressVPN is so amazing, because here's the one thing I've heard this phrase several times, in the course of just kind of like trolling online. you don't want to be buffering when you could be, experiencing real-time entertainment.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Buffering is like the antithesis of why we're doing this. So ExpressVPN has blazing fast speeds and you can stream with zero buffering in HD. That's what you want. Right?
Yep.
You don't want to be having that stutter, while you're watching content. It's compatible with all your devices. I mean, so many of us have so many multiple devices, whether it's on the Apple platform or the Windows platform, the Android platform. So it works across all those devices. But here's the big thing. Servers in 94 different countries. So it is giving you so much content and access to thousands of new shows. So whether it's the show that's John watching or like other shows that allow you to streamline your life in other countries, in other
as
languages.
We should, yes.
And of course, much like how you're using it. And it works with other streaming services like one of your favorites, John, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, and a lot more. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/missionlog. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/missionlog to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
So I think one of the first things I'm going to talk about here is just the setup. Because I think it's an interesting idea that Voyager has a finite resource. And I don't know if I necessarily buy this one because, well, look, the operations of a starship, fuel, etc. I referenced it earlier, and I said it's a little confusing, and it just seems to be a plot convenience, of course. It is kind of magical energy that they have. But I feel like this as a premise is something that should have been visited much earlier in the run and with longer consequences, too. Like every now and then there's a mention of a food shortage and they'll have to rely on rations. But then it's over as soon as it's begun. And it's nice to me to see characters react to a threat that isn't an alien attack, but more of just a matter of how they survive and how they negotiate that with each other. And it's something that can't be resolved just by pulling into Starbase. I feel like we get those little teases every now and then, but then the story is never really about that. This one, of course, goes in another direction as well, but I like this as a starting place.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing with Voyager, like looking at kind of the reality of the situation that they're in. So we accept this construct. We accept kind of like the ask, of the writers and of this premise that Voyager is out there in the Delta Quadrant. It's 70,000, well now maybe like 60,000 light years from home.
Yep.
But they still have to rely on the supplies that they have, the resources that are available, and the replenishment of said resources and supplies, i.e. via trade agreements with alien races that may or not be friendly to them, or alien races that Janeway may or may not have been able to maneuver into being, supportive, to their journey home. And I think that there's, on the surface, on paper, it's a great idea. It's a really interesting idea because, and not to steal like Robert Hewitt Wolf's maybe inspiration for making Andromeda, but that's the idea behind creating kind of like a pseudo quote unquote new United Federation of Planets while Voyager is in the Delta Quadrant, right? You're like bringing all of these different disparate races and cultures and planets into the understanding of why the United Federation of Planets is so important as an allied, organization, to share resources, technology, etc. And that's why it's problematic when we're seeing something as simple as running out of fuel as a premise for a story like this. Like, do you not look at the gauge? Do your officers not say in like briefing, meetings, at the beginning of the day, like, well, Captain, we're going to run out of fuel, like maybe in a couple hours. You might want to do something about it. I mean, I know that's very simple of saying it, but it's the truth. Like it's
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Obviously, it's unfair of us to sit here and say, like, well, they should have done it like this, But I think part of the exercise that we do is we get to look at these shows in retrospect from a couple of decades past, and try to think through, like, okay, what are the ideas that got kicked around when it was time to write this particular episode or design a season or a whole series run. And one of the things that I always liked about Ron Moore's re-envisioning of Battlestar Galactica is that you had these threads from the beginning that indicated, oh, wait, we know we have finite resources. We know that not only is there this persistent threat from the Cylons, but we also know that fuel, water, food, et cetera, and just keeping people kind of organized and in this caravan, like that will always be a problem. Right. So, like I said, I think it's a good premise here to have when we get into this episode. It would have been very interesting to understand, like, oh, these are the things that are going to come along and bite us from time to time because we know we've got limited resources in these various areas of the ship.
I mean, what the difficult thing is to as an ask, from the writers to the audience is, this is catastrophic at this time. But, there have been consistent, examples of don't use the replicator so much. You have replicator rations, the bioneural gel packs, are contaminated. So those elements are there. It's just that in this particular episode, what we're seeing is it's catastrophic all of a sudden. Without a lead into it or without a catalyst for Voyager just came out of some type of battle or something that depleted their energy, like the Killing Game. Their ship is vulnerable. They've depleted a lot of their resources. The allies that they've been trying to forge over the last couple of episodes just haven't panned out. So now they are exhausted, just in terms of their energy and their resources.
That would have been so interesting if the captain's log at the beginning had even referenced, like, after our continued skirmishes with the Hirogen, we are depleted in this many ways. Yep. So we're looking for that. That could have been cool. I don't want to belabor
I'm literally stealing from my final.
No. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Well,
no. But it's fine. But the point is that you're right. Like, it would be interesting that the Hirogen played this far greater role. In where Voyager is ending up than what they were given. And it's not that they weren't given good content. It's just that the effects of what's happening to Voyager or because of what the Hirogen were doing. And as hunters, as skilled hunters, that's what you do. You exhaust a prey to zero options.
Yeah. Well, look, I know that we have multiple topics that we can hit, but I feel like this is the point in the show where I set it up and you knock it out, which is because I started to write this down just really from my first viewing of this episode, which is trying to consider how we, me, you, our audience, how we feel about Harry. And when I say Harry, I mean the real Harry in this episode, which we get. Look, I think there's an argument to be made that we're definitely getting the real Harry at the beginning before the encounter with the Silver Blood. Everything that happens after the encounter with the Silver Blood is an extension of that original Harry. So there is something within Harry's nature that is expressed by that, but obviously the set of experiences are going to be different. This is like having the transporter clone in the respect that, okay, the Silver Blood is making an exact duplicate of this person at this time. It's just that the original, instead of being broken down by a transporter, is laying over there in a heap in a quickly dying EV suit. But there's an attempt here to grow Harry a bit. And the first thing that I thought about was this carryover from, I wrote it down as Prey, but that's not right. It's from The Killing Game, where we learned that Brannon and Joe Menosky had been kind of backed into this corner where the episode ran short, so they just reluctantly gave Harry stuff to do. But what they ended up doing was they gave him some purpose, they gave him some depth, and then I thought, okay, now it's been a few episodes later, where are we now? And is this what we see in Harry at that staff meeting and his back and forth with Tom? Is this good? Is it too little too late? Is it undermined by the rest of the episode? I have many questions, some of them specific to you, some of them rhetorical. There's a moment that I really like, and that's Harry giving his resume about the things that he has done in his time on board. And he says, look, I fought the Borg. I came back from the dead, which we just have not referenced at all since Emanations. Fought the Hirogen, etc. So, all right, that's a big setup for you to come up to the plate.
I have this titled in my notes just to give it context for all of our audience out there. The model minority. Was Harry just a checkbox in the diversity hire for this series? I know that this is probably a little askew from what the topic is of this particular episode, but I felt like I needed to get real on this. And I was really on the fence about bringing up this topic because it's a bit of a side analysis of this episode and not about the episode per se. But I'd like to comment on something that deeply troubled me personally in the scenes where Harry defended himself and his ideas from Tuvok's condescension, and more troubling, when Harry was justifying himself from a very condescending Tom Paris, who is supposed to be Harry's best friend, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to address certain scenes section by section, because when you're being represented in a character by the series, and when you're invested in how they are being portrayed, like I am, my reactions were, and I don't use this term a lot, and I don't use it lightly at all, my reactions were triggered from the Asian male perspective. So, example number one, Tom says, you were pretty forceful in there. And Harry says, so? And Tom says, so? I don't think I've ever seen you that assertive in a staff meeting before. You must be bucking for a promotion. My reaction, or Tom, you could be simply impressed by Harry's forthrightness in trying to solve a life-threatening problem, as all senior staff members are required to do in these life and death situations.
Oh, man. Yeah, I have not read your notes, obviously, and that just, in one sentence, you completely changed my perspective on that scene. I felt like the condescension from Tuvok was something that we have seen since the very beginning, right. And it's almost played off as this little joke now that, well, Tuvok will condescend to everybody. That's just the way he is. And Harry's the youngest guy on board, so he will probably be the target of a lot of that condescension, and that's just the way it is. But what you just said about Tom's reaction to that is really the big surprise here, because there's no moment that Tom comes back and says, you know what, good for you. You did the right thing there. And good for you for stepping up to the plate and volunteering for a dangerous mission and putting Tuvok in his place.
Well, he does.
More of that.
In a sense, not to that degree, but I would, in that scene, because again, the scene in the corridor is very telling, and it was very, very problematic for me personally. So Tom says, you put Tuvok in his place rightly in front of everybody. And Harry says, he was stating the obvious again. Talking down to me like I didn't know anything about demon-class planets. My reaction was, exactly. Hence my observation about, in the observation section, about Vulcan-splaining, especially in front of all of his superiors, which is unbelievably demoralizing to an Asian male who wants to be respected and recognized for his ability and for what he has worked so hard to earn, and that is respect. So, again, this is what triggered me when I was watching it. Tom says later, I'm not criticizing you. Believe me, no one enjoys seeing the Vulcan master put down a peg more than I do. I was just surprised, that's all. My reaction was, but you are criticizing him, Tom, and you don't even know it. Or more realistically, the writer didn't see it, or else they wouldn't be having this conversation in the corridor in the first place. And now you are trying to convince Harry that you aren't downplaying his reaction. That's also called gaslighting. Okay? And then Tom continues, it didn't seem like you. And Harry says, good.
Yeah.
My reaction to this is, Tom, why aren't you praising him for taking this next step as your friend? Almost every reaction Tom has to Harry's newfound behavior has been almost condescending for a person who is supposed to be his closest friend. Why not say something like, I've been waiting for this moment for so long. I'm proud of you, Harry, for sticking up for yourself.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that needed to absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Now, here's the scene that you were talking about, and kind of like Harry, like, giving his resume, just to remind the audience of this.
Yeah.
Harry says, I was young, inexperienced, and I acted like it. No question. That's the character that we knew and grew with.
Yeah.
Nervous about giving my opinion, hesitant to make suggestions, so I usually kept my mouth shut, and I behaved that way for so long it became a habit. But in the last 4 years, a lot has happened. I've fought the Borg. I've been transformed into an alien, helped defeat the Herodian. Hell, I've even come back from the dead. My reaction to that was, sadly, we as the audience have to be reminded of so many of these incredible defining moments for Harry Kim as a character.
Yeah.
So I can almost see the frustration in Garrett's performance. I feel like he's channeling something very honest. Not just about Harry, but deep within himself, as an actor in this series. And some moments are very telling. All Harry wants to do here is serve his supposed quote-unquote found family, just like everybody else. But the reactions from Tuvok, and especially Tom, only illustrate how very little they take him seriously as a senior officer, and maybe as a friend. And that, along with the consistent emasculation by 7 of 9 since she's come on board, all paint a very consistent picture of how very ill-prepared writers were to craft Harry as a character, which sadly makes him no more than a glorified diversity hire for the series, in my opinion. Again, these scenes were very personal to me, they're very triggering for me, and in many ways are very painful for me to watch the aspiration of what Star Trek is supposed to be when it comes to making sure that all representations are inclusive. And several scenes had an incredible impact of dismantling a lot of that goodwill.
There's a lot of my notes now that I want to save for the next segment, but as you say that, and let's face it, the Star Trek no-show, and even Star Trek does not have a perfect record when it comes to exploring the diversity that is still so key to the fabric of this fictional universe. But I think about everything that you just described and how Harry is still condescended to, how it's still made light of that he is showing a bit of backbone, as opposed to sometimes some very singular moments in a show like TOS, where you have Spock telling Uhura, you're the only one who can do this. You're essential. And I don't think I've seen a moment like that for Harry. And it absolutely undermines him that, as you said, he has to give the resume, because we all need to be reminded of it. And it is still treated in such a way as, not to put words into Tom's mouth, but like, oh, isn't it cute that you're standing up for yourself now?
It's time to find out what this episode has to tell us, aside from how people in the 23rd century photocopy their butts.
Even though we don't have a Max von Sydow in the studio with us right now, I think we have exercised a lot of the demon that is in this episode, from our observations to our discussion. But here we are at the end of the episode, and what we do traditionally with all of our Mission Log episodes, we take a look at the episode. Do we see if it actually holds up? Does it withstand the test of time? And are there any morals, meanings, or messages that we're able to exercise therein? So, John,
yes,
a lot to discuss, a lot of pretty serious topics. And how did you land on this episode? How did you and Voyager land on this episode? And was there a mercury pool that caused any instability in your landing procedure.
Well, I mean, as always, when we ask that question about an episode holding up, that is a very, by design, that is a subjective question. And I think that we have to frame it with, it depends. And I think as a piece of weird, old-school sci-fi, this holds up. And I'll get to the weirdness in a moment because I like weird. As something that pushes Voyager's story overall or its characters forward, well, not really. Tom and Harry have that banter that you just spoke so eloquently about in the last segment. And I very, very much see now how that is a double-edged sword. And I suppose that an argument can be made that they are still, in their alien form when we get a lot of that growth out of them. But, again, it's sort of like a transporter clone. They maintain all of those memories. Harry has still made a conscious decision to kind of grow beyond who he is or who the perception of him is. It just happens that he is now playing that out in this cloned alien silver blood form. I do feel like this episode has, there is a massive conversation missing, probably multiple missing conversations from this episode. Like maybe if we could have condensed the first 30, 35 minutes a bit and then left a gap before those final decisions are made, could we have learned more about this silver goo life form? And this is kind of like the problem that we had with the 37s, where we want to see and know what they're potentially giving up and not just hear a line about like, wow, that city was great. Nobody wants to stay. Bye.
Yeah, the stuff with Neelix and like the, kind of like that, the extra crew and going into the med bay.
Vorik.
It's enjoyable, but at the cost of these conversations that I think were important.
Exactly. I wondered, is there an issue of consent here about the crew leaving their DNA behind? There's no conversation about what that actually means and what is the outcome of that. This is a brand new life form. Well, it's two new life forms. It's the life form that we discovered, and it is the life form that has now been created out of that discovery. And we just created 140 more of them and left them on this planet.
Are these children then?
Sure. Maybe.
Right?
Maybe. So, and what does the silver goo benefit from having that much DNA diversity? Will they procreate? What happens next? What do those people on the planet do now? They have all the memories. Remember, all the memories of the crew and presumably a desire to get home? Maybe? I don't know. By the way, did that silver goo replicate the nanoprobes that are also a part of Seven? Will they keep replicating too? There's a lot to unpack here, a lot of questions that could be asked. This could make a novel or two. But here's something that I like. I like the setup here and the script's ability to give us just enough information while still clouding a lot more in mystery. Because even though those are good questions to ask, and even though there's still a lot more to tell about this story and about what happens next, I like this premise. I like this idea of a first contact situation that is so completely out of the ordinary that we don't know what to do and we can't really communicate. Because remember, we're communicating with this being that has all of Harry's memories and is only just now woken up to the consciousness of being a thing that is part of the planet. Like, all of that is fascinating, creative land to explore. And I like the idea of an alien life form that operates this way, creating a clone, thereby reshaping the alien's own perception of itself. And for that matter, is there even a self that is present before the Voyager crew arrive? We may never know. And that is part of the fun of it. I don't love the idea of character growth that is minimal and then can be discarded. And I hope that's not what happens here. I hope that character growth that was teased at the beginning, even though Harry was condescended to, as you point out beautifully, I hope that what we are seeing is a change for Harry going forward. But I'm disappointed here that it feels like a lot of the really provocative ideas got left behind. Still, it's just a cool premise for an episode, and it is a cool concept that pushes the boundaries of what a Star Trek First Contact situation could be like, and that's very impressive. So I'm willing to give this one a pass, warts and all, because it really feels like, and I think we have to credit Andre here, it feels like taking this very novel approach and saying, what if it's not all forehead of the week? And what if we encounter something that is truly alien, but also makes us kind of look inside a little bit at the same time? So even if it's not a perfect batting average here, I think that they were aiming much farther on this one. So, yeah. So I think it holds up for those reasons. How about you?
I mean, I dig the fact, that the concepts are there, and going for, concepts that are engaging and challenging. But for me, though, when I watched this episode, I mean, it was really no further of a stretch than Star Trek Voyager does body snatchers, right? Yeah. So, I don't think that's very original. Yeah. This episode was a very strange episode for me. I mean, I find it somewhat relatable only in the sense that I think a lot of us actually out there, and you, our lovely audience, you've probably been faced with this similar situation. Maybe a smaller scale. So you're driving around in a part of wherever that you're not familiar with. You're running out of gas, and you're also realizing that you're ignoring the empty light half an hour ago because that wasn't maybe the best decision. And then now you're finding that your only chance of refueling is this sketchy, abandoned gas station in the dead of night, with an attendant that may or not be there, or a serial killer, but that's a whole other, genre. And then you can't tell from the flickering overhead fluorescent lights that he's there, right? That sounds kind of familiar.
You're talking about a Class Y Sitco.
Exactly. I love how Class Y is Class Y is classy.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is. Stay classy.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a Class Y Sitco or a Class Y Amico, AA MCO. How much do you regret ignoring that gas tank empty warning light at that time? Right. So this is kind of like where I am. I mean, all humor aside, this is where I am with the, at odds with the whole premise of this episode, running out of gas. Right, running out of gas. More so, missing the obvious story reference as to why. Right, now, I mentioned this before earlier on, that Voyager's energy sources may have been compromised because of the damage done to them by the Herosian in the Killing Game. Yeah. Right? I mean, look at what happened in the Killing Game. The ship was really compromised at the end of that episode. Yeah. Several decks were destroyed. Obviously, there was a lot of energy being used to fuel the Herosian's, holodeck, scenarios. That stuff doesn't just, regenerate itself, So, yeah, Voyager's power reserve also, just as a constant, has always been a background issue. And we've poked fun at it from time to time. We, you, me, the actual show itself. When it comes to, the ship's power needs, replicator rations. Remember when Janeway destroyed Chakotay's watch gift?
Yeah, right.
In, Year of Hell Part 1 and 2? Yeah. Because she needs those rations back to power the ship. That's how dire the situation is.
She's going to eat that watch. Yeah.
Exactly. She's going to eat it. She's going to have a lovely cheesecake, a cheesecake watch, right? So you have replicator rations, holodeck uses, the Doctor's continuous online power consumption, etc. But now, in Season 4, this is the time when it needs to be addressed, right? Out of the blue, kind of like that empty warning light indicator in your gas tank. By the way, pro tip. If you don't know which side your tank is on, it's the arrow that points to that side of your car.
Arrow, yes.
Right? Yeah. It's that arrow that points to the side of your car. I just blew your mind. You're welcome. Are we to assume that Janeway is never briefed on how much fuel they have to get home? I mean, really, okay, so they, food. They stop for food, supplies, parts. These are the things they stop for. But what about energy, right? Are any of these so-called alliances that they've made in the Delta Quadrant have any way of providing them the deuterium that they need to have just a spare tank of gas just in case? Right? So I'm sorry, John. No, this episode does not hold up for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because the leap in logic is just too much of an ask to accept. And I'm surprised that it wasn't too much of an ask for the writers to not only ask themselves to accept, but ended up accepting regardless.
Hey, end of the season, scripts are running thin, so maybe that was the issue. Well, look, I'm glad that we are split on that, and I'm curious to see where we end up with morals, meanings, messages, because, the first time around I watched this and I just thought, okay, Silver Goo clones crew, that's weird, bye. And then that's it. That's just the end.
Is that our album for today? Silver
Goo clones crew, that's weird, bye.
Do it.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was.
Let's see that artwork. AI, go for it. Yeah.
But I think there are some interesting threads here. I think there are some interesting ideas to follow. One thing that we've talked about before in Mission Log on a few occasions is kind of the nature of identity and how our perception of self is generated and inextricably tied to the physical nature of your brain. And I was really fascinated with this idea that the clones of Tom and Harry are exact in almost every way, even down to the memories, which means that they have a sense of self. I love that moment that Tom thought that up until seeing his previous body in that spacesuit, he thought that he was Tom, because he wouldn't have any reason not to believe that. I thought that was some really fertile ground for exploration, just in the idea that, go way, way back in Mission Log history and any conversation about, downloading the contents of your brain into a computer. Well, if it's an exact replica, if it fires exactly the same way, guess what? You now have two entities that see themselves as you. That becomes a real problem. That's why the transporter has to destroy the original and then spit out another copy somewhere, because then you would have two beings that consciously see themselves as the same thing. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It's Tom Riker, right?
It is, yeah. Because at that moment, that was Will Riker. They just went on two totally different paths. Now you've got not just Tom and Harry, but presumably the entire crew with all those past memories, but now starting brand new memories in one timeline down there on the planet, and the rest of the original crew starting off new memories from that point forward when they leave the planet. It's interesting stuff, really is. And then, okay, there is maybe some character growth or arguably lack thereof. Again, with all due respect to how you describe the problem with those scenes, what I like is that there seems to be a conscious decision here to let Harry change, let him state his intention, and I think that is a level of self-awareness that we rarely see in characters particularly on a show like Star Trek. The question then becomes, like, how do others react to him? And the initial answers are not great, but we'll see where that goes. And, this might have found in it a thread of this environmental parable, with life, with beings being inextricably tied to the life and the environment of that planet. It's a riff on the interconnectedness of things. And I like that quite a bit. It was Carl Sagan who said that we, in our lifetimes, walking around in bodies that are made of star stuff, we are a way for the universe to interrogate itself. So for all those billions of years that there were atoms and molecules floating around the universe without consciousness, well, for a moment, those things came together to be you, and you have the intellectual capacity to look out into the universe and then pose questions to it. And that's what happens here. This is like hitting fast forward on the evolution button on this planet. Here is this stuff that had life in a respect, but not awareness, not consciousness, until something changed. And then it gets to look out at the universe and say, but who am I? And I think that's a really interesting place to, well, hopefully get the next chapter of this story. So what about you, Norman? What did you find here?
Well, first of all, after quoting Carl Sagan, I really need you to watch Babylon 5 because it's a character. There's a character that quotes a very specific interpretation of what Carl Sagan says, and she said that we are the universe made manifest. Yep. We are the universe trying to find. We're broken into fragments to trying to find, make sense of itself.
Yeah.
Right. So, for that, I'm gonna find. I'm gonna influence you in a way where
send it my way. Okay.
I really don't have a great deal to say about this episode from the standpoint of morals, meanings, and messages per se. I mean, we said in this in Mission Log and regarding this series and other series that sometimes there aren't any traditional or even untraditional morals, meanings, or messages. Yeah. In an episode that we cover, and that's okay. If you, our wonderful audience, found something in this episode that's meaningful for you, that resonates with you, it's what's most important. And maybe you can share that with me. Missionlog at Roddenberry.com. So I might be able to see this episode in a variety of different ways that you saw. Perhaps something that you can share with me that I haven't seen in this episode.
Yeah. Or that's what it's all about. I love that.
Exactly. In subsequent viewings that I can discover. But if there's an armistice silver lining in this episode, right?
Yeah.
It's the premise that this demon planet has the potential for recreating life. At least life for which it comes in contact with. But here's the question, John. Is that life, quote unquote, or is it merely replicating biological patterns?
Isn't that what life is? Just replicating biological patterns?
Is the silver compound's first contact with Tom and Harry the catalyst that shifted their sentience and their evolutionary chart? But is this life form actual life or sentient cloning technology? So, if Janeway leaves the crew's DNA behind, as she agrees to do at the end of this episode, doesn't that also leave behind the collective memories about everything? If this silver blood's alien mimicry is at the cellular level, then what else are they capable of duplicating? Now, here's where I know that I said that I don't think this episode holds up, but when I look at this deeper, this is what I want or should have happened in my headcanon. It almost seems like this is an abstract version of the beginning of the Great Link.
Ooh.
Think about this, John. And our audience out there, liquid beings as a whole that demand sentience. Is an interesting idea, right? But already done to exacting detail in Deep Space Nine with Odo, the founders, and the Great Link, right?
Yeah.
It's too bad that Voyager wasn't able to connect Armus and the Great Link and the silver blood of this planet all together as disparate races of liquid organic beings that have existed since the beginning of time itself, evolving and developing when the catalyst of another life reacted with them in a very specific way. That's where I love the promise of this episode. Yeah. That's where I think, in terms of a moral or meaning or message, the message is that, well, I guess I can interpret what Dr. Ian Malcolm said in Jurassic Park. Life finds a way, right? That's the thing with, even in the Delta Quadrant, you have all these different abilities for these life forms to try and find a way to evolve. Yeah. And I think that's the most promising part of this episode.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, 1.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. Someday, these silver blood people are going to meet the Warp 10 salamander kids and compare notes about their parents. That'll be awkward. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.